I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Dietrich. Jordan Riddelli is on vacation, but Andrew Kuo, he won't take a day off, even if you insist. Andrew Kuo, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm hyped, man. I was watching some basketball tonight. I heard House of Pains jump around in Philadelphia during overtime, the beginning of overtime. Jump around. It seems like everyone's jumping these days, man.
That's a great lead-in to the idea of, are you jumping the line? But I also now want to talk about House of Pain. This is a real dilemma of that Gen X tranquility. You're so chill about the topics that you're going to discuss that now I just want to talk about Everlast and Danny Boy and DJ Muggs and their shamrocks and their shenanigans and so forth.
You mean that famous California band, House of Pain? They're from California, right?
Muggs is from Queens. The other guys, I believe, are from California. And Everlast, despite the fact that we view him as an honorary Bostonian, he was part of Ice-T's rhyme syndicate way back in the day.
Now, you said Muggs. Are you thinking of Cypress Hill?
Didn't Muggs do their beats?
I should know this, but I think that was all. I think Muggs was Cypress Hill. I'm going to Google the hell out of this while you take over the reins for this House of Pain discourse.
Google this while I fill up dead air time. My belief was that Muggs did most of the beats for the Soul Assassins crew, of which House of Pain was part, correct?
He's produced for Everlast, but I don't see any House of Pain on his Wikipedia page.
Who did their beats?
I'm going to type this in. Who did House of Pain's beats?
I was killing valuable real estate on the world's most influential basketball podcast, and we don't have any answers to who did House of Pain's production.
DJ Lethal.
Well, fuck me.
Oh, well, to your credit, Muggs did do Jump Around.
Okay. A little bit right, a little bit wrong.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a W. That's a W.
Okay, that's a win. Speaking of such moral ambiguity, are you jumping the line for the vaccine?
Oh, I was going to say for Trader Joe's, for a limited edition food item, or a life-saving shot.
Or, the beautiful new gear that's in the Cookies Hoops store. And one way that you can jump that line.
For a mere $5.
$50 a year. Take that stimmy, 28 years of advanced Cookies merch. Just an incredible bargain.
It's incredible. There's no better bargain. But in terms of a life-saving shot, I have not jumped the line, but at least 3 of my friends have. You got any friends who jumped around?
I know a few people who did some shamrocking and some shenaniganing when it came to getting that COVID virus, that Johnson & Johnson, that Moderna, that Pfizer gold standard. I know a few people have. So what's happening in New York, I believe we're a little bit ahead of other places in America, definitely the world, for sure, is that eligibility has been creeping downward or expanding into more of the population on a bi-weekly basis. So at this point, there are a lot of reasons you can get it that are like job-related, medical-related, etc. And from my understanding, because I have not jumped the line, is that you can be pretty vague. You can say, I have pre-existing health conditions. I have one of these many comorbidities without being very specific. And if you do that, you go there and they'll give you a shot because they're in the business of administering shots, not administering shots, if that makes sense.
By the time you're there, The people there are there to give you shots, not to tell you you cannot have one, right?
Yes, and because slots are filled up, once you're slotted for it, they don't want to say no, because then who's going to get that shot,
Right.
within the several hour window of which these are supposed to be stuck into your arm.
Yeah, one of my friends, I think, just claimed. Well, one of my guy friends was like, "You gotta have some pre-existing conditions, man, something." And I'm like, "I could eat donuts for like 2 weeks straight and go to the doctor, and the doctor could be like, 'You're not doing so well,' and then I can get a shot," which is not a bad scam.
The
those
Homer
scammers.
Simpson, like wearing the muumuu, am I obese yet?
Yep. Or like training for what's the most famous role that an actor got fat for? Actually fat. Oh, was that Matt Damon? Didn't he do that for The Informant or one of those weird like Coen Brothers type movies?
He may have. Did De Niro gain a bunch of weight? I felt like he was famed for gaining and losing weight depending on his roles.
Christian Bale is famous for it because in The Machinist he like whittled his way down to like 95 pounds or something. Oh, he got fat, right? Remember that weird movie he did about the heist? Oh man, we're not on our A game tonight. We're sort of like the Sixers here.
I mean, look, it's an emergency pod at 11 o'clock p.m. So you're just gonna have to view this as a lullaby in some ways, like the soothing, mellifluous tones of our voices. Let it just take you off to dreamland.
Nightlife, baby. I have not skipped a line, but I believe in waiting my turn, and I am not against breaking the rules or scamming stuff in general, but lines is where I kind of don't mess around. Was that a House of Pain pun? I don't know.
Maybe.
Maybe it was close, but not quite there. But
Again, it's not our A game. Don't expect, to be at your typical 8 a.m. caffeinated self. Like, just groove, man.
Oh, I'm just vibing it out. What are your reasons for not skipping the line? Because I know you've been offered some get out of jail free passes.
Well, I think my presidential campaign in 20 years could be derailed in the same way that, people like Donald Trump weren't able to be president because of their bone spurs and their excuses from Vietnam.
Nice.
The same way it held back Bill Clinton or every president from becoming the leader of the free world. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it should go to people who have real conditions, and I don't have any. So I'm down to wait, and I think that's the right thing to do. I also am not angry at people at this stage. The people, I think there was a couple women who wore disguises of the elderly.
They should get
Florida.
2 shots. Respect.
I'm like, that kind of effort, you get a shot.
You get 2, 3, 4 shots.
You get boosters, whatever you want.
Yeah, man.
I actually put it in that category, though. You are right. That's kind of where my mind is at right now. If you go through the effort to get in your car and drive a couple hours, more power to you. Mm-hmm. You want to go to Javits Center at 3 a.m. and get a shot. All right. Okay. I don't think you're a bad person. I don't think you're morally vacant. It's different now than it was a month and a half ago or 2 months ago. Thankfully, the United States is up to like 5 million vaccines a day. Like it's picking up speed.
Thank you,
It's
Trump.
not that warp speed, bitch.
He did it from the grave.
The beautiful vaccines.
You're
But
welcome, America.
at this point, the scarcity, at least in New York, doesn't have the same urgency as when it was like, we need to get this to people who are on the verge of dying or people who have, incredible risks from their jobs.
Yeah.
So I don't know. My opinion on jumping the line has softened, but at this point, it's just not for me.
One of my friends has a boss who jumped the line and is annoyed at her employees annoyed at their employees because they have not jumped the line, and it would be more convenient if they can get together and have in-person meetings in the near future. And I thought that was kind of interesting because it's like it puts the worker in a tight spot a little bit because they want to do a good job and make their boss happy, but also they don't want to break the rules by jumping the line. But like these are small concessions to make. Well, these are small conversations to have overall because in the end, not jumping the line is a very acceptable thing to do.
Here on Cookies Hoops, we call that unethical behavior. Not jumping the line.
Yeah.
That's morally ambiguous. But the boss, expecting or being peeved at employees who aren't jumping the line, not cool.
Yeah.
That's immoral, my friend.
I always think that, like, how people say hamburgers are the food of the country, right? America's hamburgers and hot dogs. I've always thought it was ice cream. Ice cream is the real food of America.
Really?
Yeah, I think has a huge influence throughout the world. Everyone loves ice cream. We probably eat more ice cream than we do hamburgers, to be honest. I don't know. I'm sure I can find this out.
I swear this is like at least the fourth or fifth different food you've declared the food of America.
Well, I declared Chinese chicken wings the food of New York City, Manhattan.
Right. Okay, you did do that. That's true. So ice cream is America. Chinese chicken wings are New York.
Yeah, instead of like the slice, it's actually like it could be argued that it's like the bulletproof glass Chinese takeout chicken wings, which are like super ubiquitous everywhere outside of kind of the middle of Manhattan. But anyway, my point was, I think there's few things that are more American than a line. Like, our country is just like, it's a line culture, isn't it? Like, we just wait for stuff.
I disagree.
Go for it.
I think the UK, they love a queue. They can't get enough of queues over there.
Really?
Yeah, Eastern Europe, there's queue around the block. It's like, it's cultural. I think America's about cutting the line. We love a line jump here.
Russia is famous for their lines in a bad way. The waiting for groceries lines, right? Like during the Cold War.
The classic bread line.
Yeah, but it happened in America. In Asia, the line culture is very loose there. I would claim in China there's no lines, maybe. You just like gather and holler and get your thing.
Not to draw any conclusions about how life in China is similar in, say, Chinatown here. But when there is a bin of fruit, it is a gather situation.
Yeah, it's cultural. It's not rude. It's just like if you go to a spot and you wait in line to get a seat for, like at a restaurant, and someone behind you is like, hey, I want to sit right there. And the waiter's like, go ahead. It's a cultural thing. It's not like a sign of disrespect.
I'm trying to think where this falls under line culture. If you take European airlines sometimes, they all just line up, and whoever is there first just gets on the plane first. Now, there's not that great of an advantage to being on the plane first, other than with carry-on baggage. So if you're not doing a lot of carry-on, like, why would you wait in that line? Just get on last. But most people are doing carry-on, which is, of course, where the whole edge lies.
I like to get on early so I can catch some Z's instead of standing and waiting. I like to get a jump start on those Z's.
But my point where I was getting to in terms of line culture is that in America, we typically have these strict tiers on who gets to board first based on your points. Remember airline points? What an idea. They used to exist. But okay, first class, platinum, gold, silver, bronze, a charcoal disc, whatever, wherever you lie in the hierarchy of ores and precious jewelry. But the point is, you are always called in America, right? Okay, now we're going to do Gen Pop, and we're going to start at the back. Is that line culture or non-line culture?
I think that's line culture because there's an order to it, right? You don't have to be physically in a straight line, but it's like you have to wait your turn, sort of like the vaccine thing.
Right, but in Europe, you just get in one long line. It's crazy. If it's a big flight, it'll just be 200, 300 people just in one long line. And I'm like, just tell me when I'm supposed to get on the plane, man.
I heard someone say the one thing that is for sure going to disappear because of COVID is business travel, because it's not cost effective, and we've been doing such a good job of conducting regular business like remotely. So the whole industry of business travel is never going to return, like the executive experience.
That's a good point. But I also wonder how much of business travel was really based on that anyway, right?
It was a big industry, though. I mean, those points are technically, figuratively free, but you pay for them.
Oh, I mostly mean we could have done all these business things over the phone before, over Skype. It's like, yeah, but I wanted to travel. I wanted to go and
Get
have
away
a
visit my second family in Atlanta.
Exactly.
I got to see them sometime.
I wanted 7 martinis in an airport bar and then attempt to expense it.
Listen, we only play Atlanta once throughout the NBA season. I have to visit my second family some other time.
But this gets back to like this real kind of crux of COVID in some ways, right? Which is that no one's done anything for a year. We've all experienced so many things. We all experienced the Trump presidency in its fall. We experienced the Capitol attacks. We experienced so many things collectively, through our phone, through our computer. But there's been no small stuff. There's been very little.
Yeah, like BLM we all did, but the small stuff, right? Like going to bars, meeting new people, bumping into random people, all that stuff. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, like we haven't made new friends. We haven't met someone we disliked and had to tell other people about. It's like we're all talking about the same celebrity. All right, who are you guys talking about today? Affleck.
Yeah.
Okay. It was like our whole personal world in so many ways was subsumed by the internet world.
And gossip is a big part of life, and being kind of having that diminished is a big deal, I think.
So what do you think about this recent uptick, which I believe will become a surge very quickly, in content about the difficulty of readjusting to life? We're already seeing some articles. There was one that ran a couple weeks ago, and it was about a woman who met up with some friends. I believe it was in San Francisco. Her and her partner met her friend and their partner, and they had a masked outdoor picnic 6 feet apart in the wind.
Nice.
And then we're like, okay, I'm just going to go home now. And she wrote a think piece about, I have forgotten how to hang out. And I don't know if I believe that conceit, really. Yeah. Have we forgotten how to hang out, Quo?
I'm sure certain people have. I feel like it's just like take completism. Like, it's just like...
Go on.
Connecting, like joining hands, and everyone's own take creates the circle. And of course we're going to have like, what if I don't want to go back? I want everyone to be healthy. I want myself and my friends and family, everyone to get the vaccine. But I don't want any of that smoke from social obligation, from like interacting with people I don't know. Like, I'm not ready for that. I'm like, oh, someone has to say that, right? Because that's just the opposite take of like, I can't wait to see my friends.
Well, one part of the article that I'm specifically talking about on a micro level is that, well, hanging out 6 feet apart masked with one other couple isn't hanging out in the sense of how you remember it. So you didn't forget how to hang out. You just haven't hung out in this particular way, which isn't fun, which isn't great, which people have been rebelling against for the last calendar year. It's like, I forgot. For years, I used to have masked picnics with 2 other people for an hour. And now I've lost the joy in that experience. Yeah. No, you haven't forgotten how to hang out. And I'll say this. When you have eaten indoors on those rare occasions and you're around people, it comes back really quick.
Yeah.
Comes back real fast. 2 drinks.
Yeah. And
I'm sorry, excuse me. A beer.
a drink, one serving of an adult beverage.
After,
a serving.
After an beer,
Yep.
it starts feeling pretty reminiscent of what you've done your entire fucking adult life.
Yeah. I do think like the trauma that we've all gone through should be addressed more directly. Maybe with like Biden putting a few kajillion dollars into like healthcare and psychiatry or whatever, whatever these guys want us to do, but like I think it should not be ignored. And to say that we're going to bounce back is a bit generous, but to say that it's going to be painful for everyone, that's just a take, right?
Well, I think these are two different things. One is exactly what you're saying, that it was a really hard year for a lot of people for very legitimate, traumatizing reasons. I mean, we're talking about whether it's social, whether it's losing family members and friends to COVID, whether it's economic. There are many ways that it's been an awful year on different levels for many different people. And that needs to be addressed 100%. Like, if you look at suicide rates, you look at opioid overdoses, they soared. We didn't even hear about this stuff. Like, barely hit the, barely registered on the news meter. But it was horrific in terms of those things. And they absolutely need to be addressed by public policy, no doubt.
Yeah.
But I'm also with you on it being take completism in terms of people saying, all right, we've had so little to talk about. Here's a thing. I forgot how to hang. I don't know how to chill anymore.
Right. I love contrarians, and that word gets a bad rep in my opinion. I love people who are just like, but imagine if it wasn't that way. And I'm like, all right, I'll read that take on Twitter. And it's easy to understand people who don't feel great and who cannot really assimilate back into social life as easy as they thought they would. Like, you've wanted this thing for so long, and when you get it, you're like, I'm not enjoying this. I'm like, oh, this is real. This is, like a phenomenon that we should not ignore or treat lightly. But I don't want to treat those takes as like any semblance of like either being a heater take or being a truth. It's just like a way to describe a thing.
And also, we're also there's pre-existing conditions here where you may have had social anxiety. Almost everyone does in different circumstances. And to say, I've decided I don't like hanging out in crowded bars post-COVID. Like, did you love it before? Like, did you love it? Did you, think back. Did you really love going out and meeting your friends at a bar? Or were you more of the kind of person who wanted to just watch a movie at home? Where did you fall pre-COVID?
Yeah.
And, is this just an accelerant? Or did it really, turn your entire personality on its head? It's hard to know.
Yeah, and I think human beings and a lot of animals are creatures of habit, right? So I always joke, I just want to do the thing I did yesterday. If I stayed home and watched TV, I'm like, well, there's another movie to watch, and yesterday was all right. If I went out and went to a rave and had one adult beverage, I'd be like, I want to go to another rave and have a second adult beverage, and I think we're going to get into the swing of things really fast. And there's going to be takes everywhere. And I love takes. And I'll read all of them. But it's going to be like, we're a month into reopening everything, and it's just not the same. Or we're a month into reopening everything, and it's the same. Or it's better. It's all going to happen because that's what writers do, right? You got to get people to read you some way.
And there's inevitably going to be some people who say, because they're not necessarily lying, that I think I preferred COVID. I preferred the quietness of the street and the stillness. And I liked not having social obligations. I preferred that. I like being online. And we're like, sure. But people are like that anyway. That's not necessarily a COVID thing. Right. But yes, there's no doubt we are going to get some heaters about life was better during Quar.
Yeah. My favorite is anything that happened this year. Like, someone made a zine, and they made a zine. Are these quarantine zines? I'm like, yes, they are. It's like someone, invented a new phrase for this. It's like, is it a quarantine joke? I'm like, it is. I kind of enjoy that. It's gonna feel so far away in like 3 years. I hope, ideally, if everyone gets this vaccine, and they're claiming maybe in May, I think everyone will be eligible for one. So there's no more shamrocks or shenanigans. We can all get one of these shots.
How are they going to do it? Like, in terms of the next groups, are they? I know, it's based on age, it's based on health, it's based on job. That's been the sort of like the golden triangle of figuring out who gets the vaccine next. And I know that New York State was like, government employees can get it now, and I'm like,
Nice.
No, thanks.
Our leaders. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm okay with that.
I know, but I'm just saying. You guys decided it was time for you to get it. Like, Cuomo went and got the vaccine, I think, today.
Oh, podcasters? Oh, yes.
Yeah.
The most influential podcasters get it first? Wow. Can't wait.
But there's certainly politics that come into it.
Yeah.
Where a lot of the same jobs that are tied to media in that same area that were categorized have been given, vaccine privileges, eligibility. Yeah. And media, no. And Cuomo could certainly say media members, but he's like, you know who I like better than that? Government. People like me versus those people who keep dragging my good name in the mud.
It is an impossible thing to execute unless you just do a lottery. I think there's no way. Let's say it was only people in the food service industry can get them. It's like, well, which people and what kind of qualifications? Are we talking chefs? Second, after servers? They both touch the food. It almost becomes like a tip discussion. So I don't envy anybody who has to write these laws or enact these policies.
In terms of that specific one, I get that you're being hyperbolic there.
Yeah.
But, that made sense. If you're going to open restaurants, let every single person who works in a restaurant have access to the vaccine. No shit. Like, that's an easy one.
Drivers, bus drivers, people who work for our city, all that stuff. Yeah, they should get it first.
And then podcasters. And I don't know.
Knicks fans. But
Knicks
only the most
fans.
ethical Knicks fans. Not the haters, just the ethical ones.
People who appreciate carbs. Slices of pizza with linguine carefully latticed on top.
But 3 carbs, you get bumped down the line because that's 1 carb too many.
But you're probably closer to obesity.
Right. So you get bumped up again. So it's a win-win. Carb it up. Yeah, I don't know. I feel good though. It's kind of like we had a burst of spring in the earlier this week, a couple of days, and I felt it in the air, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, I was looking at the weather coming up because now we're post-COVID as of last Sunday.
Right.
And it does look like this little cold snap right now it might be the end. We're rolling. I'm feeling the same way as you. If America's figured out how to get 5 million vaccines in people's arms in a day, I think we can get this taken care of.
I'm ready to send those Hoka boots into the rafters, man, and then pull out my crispy Hoka walking shoes.
Are you back on the Wallies?
Those are tough because they I roll my ankles a bit in them. I'm not used to wearing them, but I might bring them back. I have some pairs ready, fresh pairs ready.
I've definitely rolled my ankles wearing Wallabies. That thick, how do they describe that sole of the Wally?
sole?
Yeah, that thick gum sole. Yeah, it's a little bit like one of the KDs. I used to wear those. I put them on, and I just immediately said, "Oh, I'm easily going to sprain my ankles and these." Went out 20 minutes in, sprained both.
Yeah, it's
like
weird.
Playing in stilts.
Yeah, I mean, there were the most famous shoe, allegedly to have sabotaged its owners, were the the ones with springs that Vince Carter wore, right? Like, allegedly they ruined knees, but there was no proof of it. Those are the most notorious.
As opposed to the strength shoes, of course.
Right.
Which, but it's kind of appropriating tall culture. Giving a couple inches, not only on your vertical, like you can touch high cabinets, but also just literally propping you up. It's a little, it's kind of a little appropriation.
So are flats appropriating short culture?
Yes.
All right.
Definitely.
Barefoot.
But if you're tall and you're not wearing shoes, then that's a pure tall culture. It's a delicate dance we do here on Cookies Hoops.
It's a quandary.
In less cheerful news than spring being back and vaccines and sprained ankles and wallabies, there was these horrible attacks that we've all heard about and been stunned by that occurred in Atlanta, where 8 people were killed, 6 of which were Asian women, 7 women altogether, by gunmen on a rampage. And this marks a sad crescendo of violence that has been perpetrated against Asian Americans over the last year. And I remember you mentioning being worried about walking outside and people saying things to you, and maybe I didn't understand the scale of it because that doesn't happen to me, but this seems to be a continuation of stuff that you and other Asian people have been warning us about for the last year.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, I've lived the life of someone who's unliked in most places, but not all places. I take the subways a lot every day to go to studio, and it's not entirely safe for different reasons. For different, a lot of people need help out there, and they're not getting it. And there's a lot of anger out there and frustration, and however you want to classify mental illness, but everyone could use some help, and sometimes when they don't get it, bad things happen. And I don't know. You could credit the rhetoric of our former president for this. It has been there already. I believe I heard some statistic that was the reported crimes against Asians are up like 150%. The ones that we know of that have been reported to the police or whatever. So you can assume it's probably bigger than that. But the shootings yesterday were horrific and awful. And there's almost like, I'm not an activist, so it's hard for me to put it into words, but I am Asian and Chinese, so it is a feeling I'm getting more familiar with, as I get older.
From your experience, this kind of violence, does it seem new, or does it seem like an escalation? Because, I'm thinking back and I'm trying to recall, other horrific incidents. It's like not something you like to try to, calculate. I mean, is this the worst one of these attacks in recent memory?
It depends on what you think, like the Chinese Exclusion Act was a few hundred years ago, or recent history, like growing up in New York.
Maybe internment camps, perhaps.
Yeah, that was a different world then, and but in the world I know, not really, right? Like, I grew up around the Crown Heights riots, and that was not involving Asians. But, there's always been kind of a simmering thing below the surface. Do the Right Thing had one of the side plot lines was the Korean grocery store, right? Mm-hmm. Menace to Society, that famous scene, and it was based off of an actual situation where I believe an Asian grocery store owner shot somebody for something they didn't do. And there has been racial tension forever, and between everybody, and Asians are not excluded from that.
Ice Cube had that song Black Korea, which
what album was that on?
I want to say Predator, but I could be wrong.
That was a good one. Yeah.
I never liked Predator really. I thought
America's Most Wanted.
I thought Death Certificate and America's Most Wanted were his better ones. But Black Korea may have been on one of the prior ones. I haven't looked it up or even thought about it in ages. It could have been on Death Certificate. It's
Those
possible.
are good records, man. They sound good.
Maybe it was Death Certificate. He was really in an angry stage at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
You had like I Want to Kill Sam, and you had a bunch of different songs like that. No Vaseline. But
He is not as angry now, that's for sure.
No. The premise was like you can't turn the ghetto into Black Korea and like we'll burn your store down to a crisp.
Yeah.
And this is not different from the tensions that you were describing before.
Yeah.
But we've seen like even in the last couple months, there's been a drumbeat from Asian people saying this is dangerous. Something's going to happen. Bad things are occurring. There's real violence mounting, and then we get this. And I guess my question here is, how do you prevent this? Like, how do you run this back the other direction? How do you de-escalate?
Yeah, that's the eternal question. It's almost basketball related, and we'll talk about that later. But what I mean by that is, I think the object shouldn't be to prevent it. The object should be to understand it. And by understanding it and accepting it and understanding that it is something that exists and will never go away, that in itself will prevent a lot of it just by understanding it, I think. The worst thing we can do is ignore it, I think. Again, this is not my lane in that I don't feel comfortable like kind of like being an activist about it, like but I desperately want to understand it as best as I can in order to live a better life. And I think the way people feel about things that they don't want to understand or that they don't recognize is a very human thing, and sometimes it's a short process and sometimes it's a long one, and along the way it's peppered by a lot of things that trigger a lot of biases that you have in your own personal history, in your own personal life. And I think bringing that to the surface is a good thing, and what happened last night is a horrible thing. First, get rid of guns, like easy. That would be the first thing I would do. And then, like, maybe, I don't know, this is so general, but, like, tone down, like, everyone just take that Gen X tranquility pill, man. A little bit. 5%. Let's tone it down a little bit. And, like, we voted the president out, and little by little, we'll get there, I think.
There are definitely some similarities in the way that white Americans have treated members of the American community, people who they live around, people who are neighbors, that are reflective of wars, right? Like in World War I, there was violence against like German Americans in Ridgewood. People were just mad at the Germans.
Yeah.
And then obviously after 9/11, you had attacks on Muslim Americans and Sikhs who weren't even involved in that whatsoever.
Yeah.
And this seems like there's a parallel where Trump specifically and Republicans yelled about China, that China is our enemy. That's the bad guy. They gave us COVID. They are responsible for this. We're going to make them pay. And
I'm not convinced that worked, by the way. I'm not convinced his rhetoric worked on that, but he's still trying it as recently as yesterday.
I would say the rhetoric working or not, I don't even know what he was necessarily trying to achieve other than to absolve himself of responsibility and create a scapegoat.
Yeah.
But I think to that end, he was effective in scapegoating Asian Americans to a certain audience of like angry white people who like Donald Trump to say, you in my community, like you are my enemy right now because of this virus. Yeah. And as we were just talking about, this is what has dominated the last year of our lives.
Yeah.
So if Trump had not said these things all the time, all the fucking time, China virus, Kung flu, all the fucking time, do I think that these incidents would have spiked in the way they did. I do not believe that.
Yeah, I agree. And the interesting, the part of last night that was odd was it had kind of nothing to do with Trump. It seems, the guy came out. I think he admitted that he's a very religious person, and he admitted he had like a sex addiction and went to these places and singled them out for a certain reason and took out his aggression there because of his guilt. Like, it's a very complicated, sad story. I mean, I'm not trying to humanize him or what he did, but
I think that's the right word, because Trump's rhetoric, I think, did dehumanize Asian people to someone like this gunman. And that makes it more logical and more acceptable in his twisted brain to commit this kind of awful crime, even if he's saying, well, it's because of my sex addiction. That's the reason. But it's also like, look at who you killed.
Yeah, totally. And Trump's shot chart, and this is some whataboutism shot chart, he sprayed it everywhere. He was shooting mid-range, three-pointers, half-court shots. Like, there was Chinese people, Mexicans, black people. Like, everyone who wasn't white was mentioned by Trump. If you weren't from Scandinavia, he shot that shot, But the coronavirus was the thing that took down his presidency, probably. And he really it was a direct line to Asia.
You just look around America and you see the problems we have and how deeply they're tied to the Republican Party across the board. And, I'm always very critical of the Democratic Party and what I perceive as, a lack of progressive policy, et cetera, and so on. Mm-hmm. But, the terrible response to COVID, this kind of violence, the guns that are available.
The riot at the Capitol building.
The riot at the Capitol building, the massive, money that's funneled towards law enforcement and the militarization of those groups. You just, as you said, a line. You can just trace it to like terrible policy, to like a platform that is just despicable. It's just wild. You just look at all these things that are bad, and you're like, this is what you have wrought with your bullshit.
Yeah, and I think a weakness politicians have is not living in the being in the present. The Last Dance, as we learned from MJ himself and all those originalists. It helps to live in the moment, I think. I mean, you have to do all three: the past, present, the future, for sure. There's some conservative ideas that make sense to me, and there's some smart conservatives out there who talk about it eloquently, who don't support a lot of these Republican politicians. But it's hard to tell, right? Because they lost the election, therefore their party is lost. But we always do this. We always talk about this. Your basketball team is good until you lose a game, and then who are you going to trade for? And I think when the Democrats lost to Trump, I think it was such an anomaly, but we had nowhere to go, and the takes were, is the Democratic Party in trouble, and does it have an identity issue? Maybe not. I think Biden won handily. Trump's failure with coronavirus definitely helped, but we'll never know why Biden won by such a large margin, but it's a number of things, I think. But yeah, I mean, I love this stimulus package that we're getting. I love the money going to kids, and I heard might cut child poverty down by half just with money, which is awesome. And it got no votes by Republicans, not a single one.
Yeah, we didn't even get around to that. The fact that the Republican Party was, steadfast, like boots, marching in lockstep. No votes.
Zero.
For a package that'll substantially make lives better for a lot of people.
Pretty popular package, and even people going through with a fine-tooth comb, it's solid, right?
I think pretty package or pretty popular is underselling it. I think it was approved.
Vastly popular, 70% or something.
75, 80% of Americans were good with it.
Yep.
And that's kind of what I guess I'm getting at, where you look at the state of the Republican Party, and I'm not talking about specific conservative thought within this. I'm talking about them literally and what their platform is and their plan and who represents them and who they represent and all these things. It's fucking chaos. It's just it's just
Are they
a
relegated?
mess.
Are they relegated? Are you putting them in the relegation league?
They should be relegated, man. Like, get out of here. It's not even a presentable, like, you're not even fielding a team. Like, who is this over here? It's me, the gun guy. Like, all right, this guy sucks. A fucking chucker. What about this guy? Oh, he hates Asians and all races. Okay. What about this one? He thinks the poor shouldn't get a penny. Okay. And to me, I just look at it and say, Dems, beat the shit out of them. Don't edge them out in a victory by playing it close. Go out there and beat them by 50. Annihilate the Republican Party. Like, I know you want this two-party state with a strong Republic. Just annihilate them by doing stuff like this package that Americans want. This is always my routine, but I'm just saying, instead of saying, yes, we're the party also of thoughts and prayers about this kind of, horrific crime, like, go out there and make tangible benefits that make people's lives better.
Yeah.
Change their lives instead of just making it about ideas and thoughts. Like, do real shit. And I think take away guns, etc.
It's weird. Thoughts and Prayers gets a lot of that meme treatment, but I appreciate that idea. Thoughts and Prayers actually help. It is a way of thinking. It's asking someone to think about something, which I think is action, actually. So I very much take that to heart when people say that. Of course, politicians say it flippantly and don't mean it, but I can mean it.
Yeah. I mean, no, I know, but that's kind of where I'm at, right? And this is part of my objections to whist sometimes. Mm-hmm. Is that I think that whist
in terms of like this kind of stuff, or are you talking about like driver's license songs and stuff?
Oh,
like
I'm saying
Titanic.
Generally speaking, the idea of whist to me and like nostalgia and warmth and like sugarcoating reality and living in the past and is deeply tied to even like Donald Trump, like make America great again. This warm sepia-toned America that we used to live in, where we all got along and everybody did fine. There wasn't all these confusions and gender names that were different. Like, to me, there's an appeal to whist that I find a bit dangerous almost, because I think it obscures like reality and it actually detracts from action, where we say thoughts and prayers. Okay, what are we going to do? Isn't that enough? We did thoughts and prayers. And I hear you about saying, well, if you get people thinking about stuff and caring about it, then they will in turn do stuff. But you also made the point that those things are not always connected.
Yeah. I mean, to support the whist, as the whist has logged on. I don't associate whist with Donald Trump for sure. We do a podcast about like thinking about what happened during a game we saw an hour ago, and good players like Allen Iverson. And a lot of people would say that's pretty wistful, right? Allen Iverson should be the logo. He is the logo. My favorite player is so-and-so. Like, that is not necessarily crucial information, but it's something that we live in. I like art, I like music, I like movies, and everyone does, but I think that's really tied to a clock and the past. And I think I love history. So, I always, we're talking about doing our thing. I always do the middle thing, right? But it's the part of my brain that wants to gather all the information before I do anything. Like, I want to sign a free agent to a max contract. It's like, well, which free agent? I'm like, okay, hold that. Let me look at the options first before I do that. And it's just like, well, make a choice, pick a side. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to do this anymore because all these good players have signed already. So like, I like people who pause a little bit. And when someone asked me today, how I felt about what happened last night, I'm like, I'm still thinking about it. I don't know. And I don't know if I'm going to have anything ever, but it's just like absorbing it and thinking about it is all I got.
You know, I'm not trying to put you on the spot to speak for like
No.
all Asians here.
No.
Just to be clear.
Yeah, no. I can speak for all Knicks fans and the Knicks organization in general throughout history, but not Asians.
But yeah. When I say miss, we're talking about this broad idea, and there's a lot of parts of it. It's fuzzy, but that's kind of what I mean, right? Is that fuzz when we say decency is back, and it's like, but what does that mean? Does decency mean that we now feel better about ourselves because we are decent? Or does decency mean that we're going to get this stimulus package through and change things for people's families and their loved ones and make them live better lives with less misery? I'm like, which is it? And it can be both.
Yeah.
But, you know, the thoughts and prayers thing, we know that's like memeology, right? Because Ted Cruz, someone will see someone they'll gun down 40 people and he'll say like, thoughts and prayers.
Sure, and then you get someone thoughtful who's just like, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, yo, let me know, you know? And it always comes down to a language. Language is everything, right? And I feel like even when an actual thing, horrible thing happened last night, and immediately we went to language because it's kind of like the one thing we can talk about and make sense of. Being like, he had a bad day. I'm like, oh, fuck, we're going to get caught up in the language of that because, that guy ends up not being my favorite person as we found out about him. But, like, okay, I wouldn't have said it that way, but, like, I don't really care how you said it. This thing happened, you know?
At the same time, that language was reflective of who he turned out to be, right?
And I hate that because it's just confirmation bias, right? But yeah, he turned out to be someone who had a predisposition against Asian people.
Right, but I mean, it was a crazy fucking thing to say.
It was heartless and stupid.
It was crazy.
But then I just ignored it, right? Like, I just was like, fuck this guy.
Right. Look, I'm not saying you should be hurt by his words. I'm saying those words came out of his mouth because he's a certain kind of person. And we were not wrong. When everyone said, that's how law enforcement phrased the worst day of 8 people's lives. They were shot down, and their families and the people who cared about them and loved one and people who are going to be terrified walking on the street. The way you viewed that was, yo, my man had a bear of a work week. Had to blow off a little steam. Tough day over at the dick-sucking plant.
I don't know. I mean, this gets into a conversation we kind of started last week about Meyers Leonard, Oklahoma City Thunder legend Meyers Leonard, about the idea of forgiveness, right? And like, I'm not ready to forgive anybody from last night, really. I don't know. I haven't really gotten to that point yet, but I hope to, and I hope to get there soon. And I know that sounds heartless for the victims, and I'm not implying that at all. Like, I'm thinking about them and myself, right? To be honest. And how they remind me of me. Isaiah Thomas, New York Knicks front office guru.
Why do you want to forgive this guy?
Because I think the world is a shitty place.
I mean, when I view forgiveness and we talk about someone like Meyers Leonard, right? It's like he can apologize, and that doesn't mean anything because there's nothing behind it other than what we just saw. And we're talking about the basketball player who was live streaming and used an anti-Semitic slur and then was actually traded today away from Miami to Oklahoma City, who will doubtlessly tell him not to show up and will not extend his contract for next season. But I don't think we need to forgive him because he says, I'm sorry. I don't think there's any way we need to forgive someone who murdered 8 people, whether it was because he's a racist or because he had a sex addiction or whatever motivations. I don't think we need to forgive him. That's not our job, right? But another example is someone like Tim Hardaway Jr. He was a fantastic player in the 90s, the inventor of the UTEP two-step, which preceded the logo Allen Iverson's crossover.
Run TMC.
A great player, absolutely an offensive dynamo, especially before he messed up his knee. But he came back and was still, an all-star level player. Great player on Miami. So he was on a radio show and said,
Le
Batard, and said proudly, "I'm a homophobe," and said, "I don't like gay people," and he was justifiably, exiled from sort of the basketball community. And in response to that, he changed. He learned. He became a better person. And when, I believe it was when Florida first allowed gay people to get married, he was like the first person to sign, I think, on like a petition for it. Or I'm getting the exact facts wrong, but I mean, he became an advocate for human rights. And now, I think it was Stan Van Gundy was on Twitter saying it's time to put this guy in the Hall of Fame. Whether he deserves it or not, I'm not sure he's a Hall of Fame player, but he's in the mix. It's debatable. That's forgiveness, right? This guy did what he was supposed to do. He improved from this. He came back a better person, smarter, and he can change other people whose minds may have been ignorant previously. I don't know that you can do that with someone who shoots 8 people and murders 8 people.
I mean,
I don't know.
I'm not a religious person, but I know one of the tenets of a lot of religions is this kind of forgiveness. I want to get there. I think that's a great thing because I love what Tim Hardaway did. I'm happy that he, in my opinion, is a better person after that incident or the way he felt before, and I'm happy that he seems like a happy person who's more at peace. And but I didn't need him to do that for him to be like available for forgiveness. Like Meyers Leonard might double down and be like, you know what, I own what I said. I just have to forgive him because the other option is not a place that I think is a good place to be. And we have to do the work, like we talked about last week. Like, who does the work? Like, we do the work. It's a community. It's not capitalist, right? Like, you don't get what you pay for. Sometimes you don't get what you pay for.
Yeah, I think the idea of doing the work is interesting because in the case of someone like Tim Hardaway Jr. or Meyers Leonard, I think that's all on them. In the case of someone who has no opportunity whatsoever, there's no way in the lifespan of this fucking loser who murdered 8 people, there's no way he can make amends for it. There's no way. It's impossible. He cannot make amends for that. There is nothing in his power. He can't bring those people back. There's nothing in his capability that makes him earn forgiveness. So to your point, you just have to give it to him if that's something you find important. So to me,
it might be a selfish act, actually,
Right. So I'm saying I'm someone who believes that people can do their time and serve, their penance to society and come out as better people. That's the idea that you hope that the criminal justice system will do. But this guy can never really get forgiveness for what his act was because it was too horrific. So in this case, the work is sort of on us, but I think it's like, how do you prevent this from happening again? How do you save lives? I don't feel any urgency personally towards forgiving this dude. Like, fuck him.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, punishing him is a way to do it. I don't know whatever punishment you believe in. I think it de-incentivizes people to do certain things, but only in the most like religious sense do I believe it. Like at a certain point, I was joking on Twitter. It's just like at a certain point, I just decided not to be like a sad Asian dude because you have a choice at that point, like in my early 20s. Because if you think about everything enough, it's like it's a steep hill to climb a little bit. And, we climb it in our own ways. We're doing a pod. We're talking about it. This is the most I've talked about this subject to anyone for the last day. But, like, It is everything you externalize and internalize has a series of choices. And sometimes there's multiple choices, and sometimes you can reduce them down to two. And in this case, there's a multitude of choices, but I always kind of lean a certain way with it, because in order to make sense of where we live, we have to find out how we're going to pick and choose, right?
Yeah, and I think that you should forgive him if you want to forgive him, just to be clear. I'm not saying that you shouldn't forgive him. I'm speaking only from my standpoint, that I just don't view that as part of the equation with him. But if you do, then you should, because this is no longer about him. It's about how you process this. And that's what's important, right? Like, your forgiveness doesn't matter to this schmuck.
No.
It's important to you, so therefore you should do what you need to do, because that's how you have to process this. And I'm processing it in a different way, which is like, I don't care about him.
Yeah.
Like, he's off the table, and I want to try to figure out what happened here and what caused this, and how do you prevent that from happening again. I'm not saying these, and since I'm not personally going to be able to do that, these are both things that we do to ease our own minds.
Yeah, and this is not like we can, like, in the last 100 years has been a debate of passivism versus activism, right? And it is something that we've debated and not really have. The answer is always in the middle, I think, and for me, I think there is a point where you're too passive, and there's a point when I'm personally too passive, and then there's a point where I'm too active too, and it's a fine line to straddle. I don't think one is necessarily always the option, and every situation is different. But I do hear what you're saying. Like, the passive route has its fair share of critics.
And I mean, these could also go on whatever side of the political the political spectrum that you wanted to, right? Because you could be a right-wing activist, you could be a left-wing activist. This isn't necessarily like right versus left. It's action versus inaction, in that way.
Yeah.
A lot to think about.
I think we solved it. I think case closed, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'll have to run back the tape, but I think we've sorted the nation's problems out. It's just a matter of
tune in the cookies, guys, if you want to figure this thing out.
We fucking did it. First, we solved COVID.
Now we solved racism.
Here we are. We did it. Basketball talk. Well, this is coming on the heels of a Sixers loss to Milwaukee, two of the crown jewels of the Eastern Conference. Kind of a frustrating loss if you cared about wins and losses, if that makes sense. So, I don't, but if you did, there were some agonizing moments of this game. So the Sixers have the best record in the East. The Brooklyn Nets are right on their heels. I'm not sure if this game drops them behind them. So there was some bragging rights for first place in the East at stake. The Bucks are in third. They're certainly a contender. They made strong moves over the offseason. They were probably the favorite last year and the year prior and were disappointing. But they've been very tough again this year. I'll say this, man. As a Sixers fan, I've been worried about the Bucks more than almost anybody in the Eastern Conference going into today.
Even over the Nets?
A little bit. The Nets are still unrefined. Like, we know how good the Bucks have been, and then they've added other pieces, like Drew Holiday. And I'm not saying he makes them that much better, but they're a good team that's like figuring things out. I find them a little bit scarier than a Brooklyn team that's still kind of clawing for pieces.
Fair.
They don't have the same talent as Brooklyn, though. By the end of the year, depending on what happens to the deadline, maybe Brooklyn is unbeatable. That's not going to happen with Milwaukee. They're not going to be unbeatable. Brooklyn might.
I have James Harden being a runner-up to MVP after Kevin Porter Jr. So it's like it's hard to beat that, man.
But after watching this game, my level of fear as a Sixers fan towards the Bucks went down to like 2 out of 10.
And I saw
It was like 8 out of 10 before. Like, oh, they're a scary team. Now it's like 2.
I saw this on the group chat when we're talking a little smack during this game, and the Sixers had a closer than it could have been game against the Knicks. The Knicks are not too shabby. It was the Sixers, I believe, first game without Joel Embiid after the break, or maybe second, and they didn't look great, but it didn't matter because their MVP guy wasn't playing. Tonight, I was kind of pleased because a game ebbs and flows. So the Sixers had a big lead, but like we know how basketball works, and
The Bucks went one of their first 17 from 3. I looked at that lead and was like, the Sixers aren't playing well. If they were playing well, they'd be up by 35.
Right.
I looked at it as good chance the Sixers lose this game.
And they were just missing shots too. We can get into X's and O's in a second, but I think as a worldview fan watching this game, I was just like, yo, the Sixers with Embiid can just take any team, but when you don't have Embiid, you don't have your MVP player, right? So it's just like, it's a seismic difference in what kind of team this is. And, Ben Simmons was doing his thing. No one shot well on the Sixers tonight. And they played him close.
So my only real takeaway, the only thing that I care about from that game was that Giannis can't score on Ben Simmons. This is huge.
Was he in Simmons' state pen?
Simmons swallowed him, as they say.
Put him in jail.
Giannis ended up with a good stat line, but that's not what happened, if that makes sense. That's not what occurred.
Oh, yeah, I get you, for sure.
So 2 years ago, there was a clip of Ben trying to guard Giannis. Giannis put his shoulder in his chest, pushed him back, dunked on his head, and was just like, he's a baby, as he was flexing his muscle. He's a baby. And Ben did come down and catch a tip-in dunk over Giannis, so he got a little bit of payback. But from that game, my thoughts were, look, we've seen Ben become this incredible defensive player who's clearly the best defender in the NBA. It's not even close. We've seen this occur over the last year and change. And he can guard Lillard. He can guard Doncic. There's all these guys that he just eats their food. Like, he did a great job on Harden, etc. Giannis was that one guy that in my mind, I was like, I still don't think Simmons can do it. Giannis is too strong. He's too big. He's got such reach. Simmons doesn't have great wingspan. I don't think he can do it to Giannis. Bro. Fucking stonewalled him. Giannis had nothing at the top of the key, screaming for 9 consecutive picks. Like, anything in the world to get Ben Simmons off of him. And after I saw that, I'm not worried about them at all. They have 2 guys who can guard Giannis. It's just not a threat.
And Giannis got his at the end and won with a 3 and a nice little, I believe, a little jumper. And he got the win, but I know what you mean. I think like the clip you're talking about, like when you pair these 2 players up against each other, I think Simmons is the one who has to adapt to what Giannis does, right? And it's only a matter of time. By the time Simmons is that good, eventually Simmons will figure out how to defend Giannis, and that time might be now.
I mean, it happened. I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was starting to watch the game with a lot of apprehension because he could not guard him before. And he did. I mean, he stonewalled him. Had him in the post, couldn't move him.
Yeah, last night you told me the Sixers could get mollywopped, and
yeah, I didn't think they had any answer for him. Yeah. And that's the reason they lost, because just to get into the nuts and bolts a little bit, there was basically a play where Simmons was driving. He had a kind of a chicken wing out a little bit on Drew Holiday and went in for a dunk, and they called an offensive foul. Yeah. Holiday sold it fairly well, but I think if you had challenged that, you would have won. Because I think it was a horseshit call. And had you not picked up that foul on Simmons there, then he would have been in the game whenever Giannis was. But as a result, Doc took him out late in the third, and the Bucks made their entire run, and Giannis started going wild when Simmons was off the court.
Right.
When he came back on later, then he picked up another foul, and then he was worried about fouling out, and then he couldn't guard him aggressively. So my butterfly effect goes back to not challenging that call, and that really is what cost the Sixers the game. Not his decision there, but that moment, that extra foul on Simmons is the reason that the Bucks were even competitive to me.
Yeah. One of my takeaways was the addition of Drew Holiday is a big deal. I think Drew hit a couple shots down the stretch. He is kind of a release valve for Middleton at this point. Like, they have their Alfred, and the trade deadline is looming, and we don't have to get into that, but the Bucks seem like kind of a complete team to me. They don't really have to do much. DiVincenzo is kind of good, even though he had some brain farts tonight, like that last shot on your boy Furkan.
The Bucks are really good. They're really good. They have a guy who's incredibly difficult to guard. They have good perimeter defenders, which they have not always had in the past.
Yeah.
A lot of their journeymen that they've had surrounding Giannis have not been tough defenders, and it's a lot different having someone like Drew Holiday at like the point of attack. And even though DiVincenzo and the Irishman, whatever his name is, like, they're pretty solid. McConaughey, whatever, Connaughton, like they're solid defenders.
He's some and one shit there.
That's what I mean. Like, they actually guard the they guard the perimeter, I think, a lot better than last year, which was really gimmicky, and they would just crowd into the paint. So they still protect the paint really well, but they contest threes better this year than they did last season. But their defense has slipped a bit, and I think it's a product of opponents just shooting threes better against them.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I think that they can become a more conventional defense while keeping that kind of rim protection and be a really dangerous team.
Yeah.
But for me, just having two guys on Philly and Ben and Joe who can guard Giannis one-on-one, to me that takes away a lot of what the Bucks prefer to do.
I mean, I almost have like this nihilistic point of view towards the Sixers in that they have the right guy as their general manager, Daryl Morey, obviously. And if they lose, it's just because the other team either hit more shots or the Sixers didn't hit enough shots. Like, this team lost tonight because they didn't have Joel Embiid. If they don't win a championship, it's because something happened, because this team is where it should be. This team is awesome.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the same thing. My only quibble right now is that I do love a lot of things about Doc Rivers. He's a great statesman for the game. He definitely has players focused on their roles in a way that I really respect. Guys aren't trying to do too much. There are very few possessions where it seems like someone takes a shot because they kind of feel like it's their turn. You know, everyone's trying to do the right thing. And that's a testament to the coach. Everyone is on the same page. No one seems to have a motivation of, I'm going to be a free agent. Let me get my points. You know, people are doing what they're supposed to do. At the same time, he's stubborn, man. He's an old head. So
what are you seeing? I know you're seeing something in the rotation.
Yeah, his reluctance to play B-ball Paul, the Sixers' 58th pick in the last draft, who was the best player in the G League a few weeks ago, the little G League bubble. He won't give him any tick, and he's the only big guy on the team outside of Joel Embiid who can shoot at all. So if you wanted me to say, point out a game in which Ben Simmons will shoot 5 of 15 and have like 7 turnovers, I would be like, the Bucks game. Yeah. The one with the Bucks where Joel Embiid is out. He will have a horrific game and everyone will say he's bad again because it's the best interior defensive team in the league, and he's out there for 40 minutes with Dwight Howard and my boy Tony Bradley, king of the offensive rebound. And Doc wouldn't flip it up.
Yeah.
And it happened against the Knicks the other night. Same deal. They struck like all these games when I wanted to see Ben Simmons free as a bird, flying around with shooters everywhere, running out on the break. It's a fucking slog because they're playing him next to a non-shooting big every single minute. That was the one solace of a Joel Embiid injury, that we're going to see some weird stuff. And Doc Rivers is like, oh, hell no. Hell no. It's 1998. You know what? I'm sick of people saying this is the 90s. Everyone, it's the 90s. I say it all the time. I say it all the time too.
Well, but Doris Burke said that tonight. Yeah,
I know. They said it like 4 times. Daryl Morey said it the other day. I'm only making fun of it because we also say it.
Yeah,
it's the early 2000s. Let's give eras their proper respect.
Yep.
Instead of saying this is 90s basketball, say this is 2002 basketball, because that's actually what it is. That was the slowest tempo in NBA history. It was the lowest offensive ratings. It was the worst basketball the league has ever seen. We didn't see 90s ball. We saw 2003 hoops.
When is defense going to get its due, right? Because when the offense is firing, it's just like the defense is terrible in this league right now. And then when the offense isn't firing, it'd be like everyone's missing their shots. The offense is terrible. I mean, like, are we just watching a defense slowly in certain places making adjustments?
I think that's true. But there's also a thing here that we have to account for, and I don't know how to do it exactly, is that when we say, well, teams are scoring more, they're more efficient, it's not necessarily reflective on the defense getting worse. It's also reflective on the value of the shots that people are taking. Yep. So, to your point, we're like, no one defends anymore. Look at these scores. Like, they are defending. They're defending really well.
Yep.
Teams are just taking higher value shots. If you eliminate most long twos and you turn them into threes, like, the average point value just goes up naturally. Mm-hmm. Defenses can't change that.
Yeah.
A guy getting an open 16-footer in 2002 and a guy getting an open 22-footer today, the defense is the same. Yeah. It's just an open shot that's worth more. Players are more skilled.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I think defense today is as better than it's ever been.
Yeah.
I do think there are certain prototypes, like the defensive-oriented four, that can't really survive that well in today's league. Mm-hmm. So defenses may have had more of a command of the game back with, like, the Knicks could have the best could have the best defense in the league and, be an elite team that wins 60 games or whatever with an utterly mediocre offense. I think that's hard to do.
Yeah.
But, yeah, man, these good teams have awesome defenses.
They're incredible, and it's just like it's trying to weather the wave of, like, the offense and their compound interest, right? Like, the offense isn't doing one thing better, it's doing a multitude of things better, and those multitudes are doing multitudes of things better, whether that be biometrics or more valuable shots, right? It's just like it's wild how good these offenses are compared to 10, 15 years ago.
Right. Yes. This is true. And no one ever gives defense credit. Giving a poor shooting power forward an 18-footer that he made 36% of the time is now someone who knocks down that three-pointer 38% of the time. Yep. Defense is doing their job, man. These guys are just better at making shots.
Yeah, for sure. And there's certain rare instances like Ben Simmons who catches up to a one-on-one matchup versus Giannis. But in general, the offense always has the advantage, right? Because it is imposing its will upon something else. And defense, by nature, has to react. So it's at an inherent disadvantage, right?
Yeah, because even if your offense sucks, you're going to figure out a way to probably get up 30 open threes.
Yeah. Because
you get 100 possessions. You're running around on the court. You're going to get some fast breaks off of turnovers, but you're going to get 30 open threes, and you're going to make some of them. And those are better shots than 30 long twos that you might have taken 15 years ago. I mean, give the D its due.
I mean, yeah, and we're looking at a team in New York City that is great at one thing, and I'm not
Talk
talking about the
your
Nets.
Talk your talk, Quo.
A top 3 to 5 defense in the New York Knicks. They just have good defensive points of view and good defensive players to execute, right? Thibodeau is real. All this stuff is real. And I am getting more increasingly frustrated game by game.
So before we get into your existential terror about the Knicks diving into the tar pits of mediocrity.
Yeah.
Forever.
Oh, they're heading there.
I'll say this. I've watched them play a couple games this year. Seen them against the
A
Sixers.
couple? Do you even watch the games, bro?
The Knicks had to win me over. I saw a few of their games, some of the endings. I've been rooting for them, but to sit down and really pay attention to the Knicks took me a little while because they're totally overperforming from our early expectations. Mm-hmm. They are overperforming in terms of opponent field goal percentage. They had an easy schedule. There were a lot of things to look at and say, this team isn't really that good. But you watch them play, and they've played half a season. The defense is tough. They play hard. They're disciplined. They can test shots. Mm-hmm. I was really impressed by watching them, nose to tail against the Sixers.
Yeah.
The Knicks defense is totally legit.
Totally
they don't
legit.
they don't have a ton of firepower. Randall does his thing. Randall's around. You stare at him.
Yeah.
But the Knicks defense is very legit. Mm-hmm. I understand why Knicks fans are excited, and I was making fun of that a few weeks ago. When people are outside the Garden when they're like 2 games beneath 500 celebrating in the streets.
Yeah,
but you watch them play and you're like, you know what? This is fun. Yeah. It's the kind of team that New York fans always mythologize. A hard-nosed defensive squad that punches above its weight.
Yep. NFTs, non-fungible Thibodeaus, man. There's only one. And he's come true to his promise, right? And my thought with the Knicks, as they're going to win half their games and probably be a play-in team. And it's just staring purgatory right in the face, right? Unfortunately, and I don't want to be totally negative. This is awesome. It just happened a little faster than I thought it would. Julius Randle just turned into too good of a player, and bafflingly, they signed Nerlens Noel, who is an excellent defender. By advanced metrics, he's a top 3 singular defender in the league by BPM and defensive rating, whatever.
You got to tell me more about this kid. I'm into him. This Nerlens guy?
And it's confusing, right? Because some games he'll score 0 points and have 1 block. But it's he is not proven to be a future star. I think you can probably have him at the trade deadline. And this is where I'm going. The Knicks should be sellers, I think. Unfortunately, and I'm not trying to always zag here, but I don't want respectability from the league. I want a championship. Respectability is built into striving for a championship, and I know that's pie in the sky stuff, but you got to do it, right? How are the Knicks going to win a championship? They've unearthed Mitchell Robinson and IQ. Fine. Lou Williams / who is a Mitch Robinson comp? DeAndre Jordan-Light? Marcus Camby, right?
I think Camby's a good one.
Yeah, one of my favorite Knicks ever. And so you've unearthed those two. I was hoping Mitchell Robinson would be a star, but it looks like he's a great rotation player, an excellent rotation player. And IQ could gobble up minutes and maybe score a ton of points. But you don't have enough. And I'm skeptical. I'm growing also more skeptical of this draft coming up, but you just have to play the draft still. I don't know if you caught Kirk Goldsberry's article this week, maybe a couple days ago on ESPN about coastal elitism. And he wasn't talking about the cookie shop. He wasn't talking about that amazing tote bag with what's his name? Eustace Tilley spinning a basketball. Mm-hmm. But his point was in order, depending on what your market is, you only have a handful of ways to rebuild a team. And there's 3 ways: free agency, a trade, or the draft. And the conceit is small markets have to rely on the draft, and big markets like New York and LA fork over all their assets just for superstars, like the Nets did, and what the Celtics kind of do from time to time, what the Clippers did with Oklahoma City, all these things. Again, Knicks ruined this whole theory. Knicks are an outlier here, but they would love to do that too, I think.
But from this theory, I mean, the Knicks have succeeded on a smaller level via the draft and free agency, right? They signed Randall, they signed Nerlens,
who no one wanted. They only, Randall was
I'm
not
just
a
saying,
commodity.
Right. But I mean, well, they wanted him. I don't know. Someone would have paid him something, but the Knicks were like, "That's our guy. Let's go get him."
Sure.
And they drafted RJ. They drafted quickly. They drafted Mitch. So I mean, I think this theory does hold for the Knicks. They're just nothing resembling a contender because they don't have a superstar.
Well, the theory is the Knicks would be find success through trades and free agency, but they haven't found it through free agency. It's through the draft, which is a small market kind of move. But it all reminds me, this thought kind of always brings me back to my favorite Clydeism, which is the Knicks can't handle prosperity. And to me, this is what's happening this season. You signed Julius Randle with the hopes of him becoming a value. You signed him to 2 years, right? In hopes he becomes a valuable asset to maybe flip or sign. And I think there's a value in flipping him right now, of course. And there's a value to re-signing him too. But he's going to get a max. I don't want the Knicks to, bail now. You're almost at the jump. Go for the jump. You're all the way down the slide. Just jump off that tire into the lake because this is what you're here for. And I think the Knicks should proceed with their plan with a straighter line than they are because they're getting seduced by these little nuggets, these little truffles of statistics,
I mean, this idea that larger markets have inherent advantages is not new. And I'm not saying that to counter anything that Goldsberry said. I'm just talking about this discussion we've had for years, that big markets have this edge. And we saw it happen with the Lakers repeatedly. They get Pau Gasol. Oh, they get Shaquille O'Neal. Oh, they get LeBron James. Anthony Davis.
Steve Nash.
Exactly. Dwight Howard. Chris Paul. Whatever.
Gary
Whether
Payton.
it's trades or it's superstar signings, whatever it is, they always have this just endless influx of high-end talent through its history. Wilt Chamberlain. But we've also known that the only thing holding the Knicks back was mismanagement. And that was also the case for the Clippers. And that was also the case for the Brooklyn Nets when they first got to New York, coming across the water from New Jersey, washing up on the shores of downtown Brooklyn. But the Clippers and the Nets have smart management now. Yeah. And as a result, we're seeing how potent those advantages of being in New York and LA are when coupled with competency. All of a sudden, you have this constellation of stars on the coasts that wasn't happening for years in, say, Clipperland.
Yep.
No one wanted to go there. But now, Kawhi, Paul George, Serge Ibaka's heading on over. Still Los Angeles. You're the Clippers, big market, lots of money, lots of celebrity. It's a great place to live. New York, Brooklyn, dirtbag organization, the Nets. No one likes them. They're giving away their entire future for washed-up Celtics, of all people.
Yeah, I don't think Sean Marks has a good reputation for grill masters, but he had a rough time with Prokhorov, but he's the one, right? He's a brilliant mind.
He's the one who did everything good. With all due respect to Billy King, the longest view in the room.
Yeah, but I think grill masters view Sean Marks as someone who hasn't done anything, right? But to us, he's done everything. He set up this whole thing for Kevin Porter Jr. Light, James Harden.
He showed when you actually put a functional basketball organization in New York City, even if it's the off-brand version, even if it's the Nets.
It's really off, man.
No one even likes the Nets. They don't have a fan base. No one likes their uniforms. And they have 3 of the greatest offensive players in the history of the planet are all on their team.
In their prime. In their fucking prime.
And that's the fucking Nets. The Nets.
Insane.
I don't even know a Nets fan other than like New Jersey day ones.
Shout out to Chris Thompson, friend of the pod. What color is that court? Is that green?
That one's like the...
You know what I'm talking about.
The slate-colored one? Or what?
Yeah, it's like a mossy. It looks like hyper-treated outdoor planks of wood.
I think it's supposed to be just gray.
Yeah, it looks green to me, but my eyes are so messed up. But I don't know. To my point, like, I got a lot of heat on Twitter about this. I got ratioed on Twitter for my Knicks take. I triple-doubled off of that with comments, likes, and retweets. But I think I'm steadfast in this. I believe this. I think you shoot for a championship, and the pieces are there, but you cannot get weak of heart right now. You have to stomach another push. And then, there's rumors that Lonzo Ball is maybe on his way to a place, possibly in New York. There's mutual interest there, and his father would want that to happen. The Knicks should just max him, or if he's going to cost an exorbitant amount of money, the Knicks should just pay it, because they have the money that they saved for KD and Kyrie, and this is what it's there for. And you're going to be overpaying him, but he's 24. He's going to be 24, and he's awesome, and the secret's out. So you're going to have to pay for him.
I'm a big fan of Lonzo. Wouldn't the move be just to trade for him and then match whatever someone else offers? Because there's only a few teams with a lot of money. There's the Spurs, there's OKC, and there's the Knicks. So if you take him away from yourselves and remove yourselves the ability to max him out and bid against yourself, then it's only 2 teams who are likely to pay him.
Ooh, this is a weird mental gymnastics. Wow. So, right. Huh. Mm-hmm. So if you had a 6-pack of beer and you drank 3 of the bottles.
A beer.
Right.
You had an beer. Mm-hmm.
A beer, which is like maybe 3 bottles.
Sure.
That means you would only have 3 beers and therefore no longer a 6-pack. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
No, I'm trying to get my head around it, because the immediate logic, the zig would be, why would you trade for him? Because you could just pay him when he becomes available and don't do the Carmelo Anthony mistake again. But the zag would be, you don't have to give up that much for him, because he is going to walk anyway. So he could probably be had for a song, although they might be hoping for a playoff run, right?
Well, what I'm saying is, if you are a team like the Pelicans and they're not sure if they want him as part of the future, depending on what he's paid, because their money is going to go to Zion, their money is going to go to Ingram.
I don't think they're going to pay him. He's going to be very expensive.
But he's only expensive depending on who is willing to bid on him. So if the Knicks are like, look, man, we're going to offer him $30 million a year, like the max contract for a restricted free agent, or you can take these assets now, but we're going to give him that money. Mm-hmm. If you're the Pelicans, you say, well, we don't want to pay him that, so we might as well take some assets for the time being. You could also say, go fuck yourself, and we'll let you offer him that money, and we won't match it, but we'll just use up all that time during free agency when you can't use that money that you've given to him, and then we'll say, yeah, cool, go take him. And then you'll be paying Lonzo Ball actually what you're threatening to pay him. You could do that. I'm saying there's a little gamesmanship here that both teams could do.
But also, isn't there the vibes factor where if the Pelicans can find their way into the play-in, and they maybe win the play-in, or they have two exciting games in the play-in, and they're like, Lonzo, we got a good thing going here. don't you want to stick with this budding superstar and Ingram and Josh Hart, and Nikhil Alexander Walker? Like, this team is where you want to be. New York is, you don't want to play for Dolan. You want to pay for us.
Sure. And he might say, you're right. I do want to be here. And what will you pay me? And they're like,
LeVar would never let this happen.
I'm saying, just imagine the conversation. I would like to be here.
Yeah.
What will you pay me? And they say, how does $17 million a year sound? That's good money, right? That's what Eric Bledsoe took when he was in Milwaukee. 17, 18 million. We can do that. And the Knicks are like, what about 27 million? Lonzo's probably not going to turn down $30 million over 3 years to stick around with the Pelicans. Just probably, because almost no one would.
Yeah, I agree. Do you want to talk about LeVar Ball's secret sauce, or do you want to save that one for later?
I haven't thought about it enough.
Mm-hmm.
And
We'll save it.
I do want to think about it.
Okay.
I think we've threatened for multiple weeks to reveal by trying
it better
to
be
figure
good.
out.
Yeah. He's an extraordinary, influential NBA person that we don't think about enough.
He rules.
He's awesome. He's the best. He is the best. I saw a YouTube video about some guy, a YouTube sleuth, trying to figure out how he gets all of his money, because he has his own basketball league. He lives in a luxury mansion. He has nice cars, and the guy just tried to modestly, he wasn't being weird, modestly trying to figure out where he got his money. His conclusion was, no spoilers, Lonzo Ball just pays for everything off his rookie contract.
I was about to say,
Yeah.
The secret is that he has two sons who make a combined $17 million a year.
Yeah.
The secret's out. My kids are in the NBA.
But remember, he played in the NFL, so it was a reasonable kind of YouTube discussion. He was like, but he didn't make that much. He only made a few $100,000 in the NFL, being a practice player. But God, Triple B, man, I was hoping for good things from them. Can you still get merch?
I don't know. We should look that up.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I can't wear that stuff, but I heard it's pretty high quality. It's $100, way more expensive than Cookie stuff, which is a limited edition.
Cookies.
I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.